The Trump administration admitting the quiet part out loud in a Manhattan courthouse Thursday, saying that they do indeed believe Donald Trump is king, that every public servant in the federal government is there to serve Donald Trump and Donald Trump only. That apparently includes those responsible for upholding the most fundamentally nonpartisan and small d democratic principle there is, and that is the rule of law. That stunning public admission came in a hearing in a lawsuit filed by Maureen Comey. She is a former federal prosecutor. She's also the daughter of former director of the FBI, Trump critic Jim Comey. She alleges that she was fired illegally, either largely or entirely, because of her family name. Politico is reporting this on that hearing Thursday. Quote, DOJ lawyer Karen Lesperance said at the pretrial hearing that Maureen Comey's firing was valid, quote, even if there were political motivations. Okay. A reminder, Maureen Comey says she was fired after her dad posted on Instagram an image of beach shells that were shaped in the formation of four letters, 8647. He took it down almost immediately, but Donald Trump and his allies jumped on it, claiming it was some sort of threat. Jim Comey was indicted for that post on your screen right now last month. But after the post, right-wing influencer and Trump ally Laura Loomer started to beat the drum to pressure then Attorney General Pam Bondi to fire Maureen Comey. So in Comey's telling, political motivations are the entire reason why she was subsequently fired. And now Trump's DOJ is arguing that even if that's the case, it's somehow acceptable. Politico reports that the judge pressed DOJ on that claim, on the claim that Trump can fire anyone based on politics. Quote, could the president, for example, decide to fire people in order to achieve an all-white executive branch or all black, he asked. Justice Department Attorney Karen Lesperance stammered in response, finally saying, quote, I can't answer on behalf of the government. Furman replied, quote, you are here representing the government. An attorney for Maureen Comey, Ellen Blaine, said in court that the DOJ's position was a, quote, novel and breathtaking theory of presidential power. In former FBI Director Jim Comey's view, it's also stupid, immoral, and tragic. Here's what he had to say about his daughter's firing on this program a couple weeks ago.
Right, my daughter was a superstar prosecutor in the Southern District of New York and was fired only because she has my last name. That's stupid, that's immoral, that's illegal in my view, and painful. She'll be okay. I mean, she got a job at a law firm, and someday I hope she'll go back to the Department of Justice. My son-in-law, who was the deputy chief of national security at that Virginia U.S. Attorney's Office, quit the day they first indicted me. Also just a tragedy to have that apolitical talent leave the department. God willing, he'll be back someday, but it both tells you the quality of the people that this organization typically has and the cost with Donald Trump at the top.
Team Trump arguing in a court of law out loud that Donald Trump can fire whomever he wants for any reason he wants in a case that has come to encapsulate and define his purge of the Justice Department is where we start today. New York Times Justice Department reporter Glenn Thrush is back with us, plus former assistant special agent in charge at the FBI, national security and intelligence analyst for us, Michael Feinberg, is back. He filed an amicus brief in support of Maureen Comey. And here at the table with me for the first time, the aforementioned Ellen Blaine. She was chief of the Civil Rights Unit and an assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. She now represents Maureen Comey. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So just quickly, just to be on the record, how did you come to leave the office of the Southern District of New York?
I left before the election, so I left for various reasons. I had been there a very long time. I love the office. I love the Department of Justice, but my decision had nothing to do with politics.
But you have witnessed now, as someone who was once inside, what has been, I think, an unprecedented level or volume of departures from that office. Danielle Sassoon and her deputies, and then Maureen Comey and others. Can you just speak, because we try to sort of, from the outside, assess, and I think last time Glenn was here, I put him on the spot to try to quantify how hollowed out, how what the deficit is in terms of manpower inside some of the biggest offices. Can you speak to that at SDNY?
I mean, it breaks my heart, is what I can say. SDNY is hurting. The entire Department of Justice is hurting. They are under rules that they've never had to follow before, and the rules seem to require loyalty and not following the law. The rules require pledges of acquiescence and not actually giving your client legal advice and explaining the litigation risks and the do's and don'ts, what the law requires, what the Constitution requires, and what the law prohibits. That is no longer allowed in the Department of Justice. SDNY has seen a number of people, particularly in the civil division, which is where I worked, leave over the past 18 months in a wave that we have never seen before. And that makes perfect sense because this administration has made very clear that DOJ is not to do DOJ's job. And as an SDNY former AUSA, you know, it was very proud and clear that our goal was to do justice, to follow the law and the facts without fear or favor, no matter where they led. And that's exactly what Maureen Comey did for her decade in federal service, leading some of the most high-profile prosecutions in the office. And because her last name is Comey, she was fired. That is a different DOJ than we have seen before.
Is there anything in the work she did or the cases she worked on that had any reasonable person could interpret as political?
Absolutely not. She was a career civil servant. She served under Democratic administrations, under Republican administrations, under the first Trump administration. She prosecuted Jeffrey Epstein. She prosecuted Maxwell. She prosecuted P. Diddy. She received outstandings on every single one of her performance reports. In fact, the office said in one of her reports that she is the lawyer the office turns to when excellence is a must. And that is true. She is, as her father said, a superstar attorney. There was zero reason to fire Maureen Comey except for her family affiliation. That is unlawful, and it is chilling.
What happened in court yesterday?
So we are in court because Maureen Comey has brought this lawsuit, right, alleging that her firing is in fact unlawful. And that's important. It's unlawful in various ways. It's unlawful because it violates laws passed by Congress 150 years ago and followed by every single president since Chester Arthur until today. It also violates the First Amendment and the Fifth Amendment. So it violates our fundamental Bill of Rights in the U.S. Constitution. But her case is broader than that. Her case is actually about whether the president can do that. Can the president violate the laws of the United States? Can the president violate the U.S. Constitution? And yesterday in court, we heard that answer loud and clear. The answer is yes. The answer is the president can exercise his Article II power however he sees fit. So he can fire you if you're female. He can fire you if you're black. He can fire you if you're white. He can fire you in order to create an all-white federal service. He can fire you just because of your last name. That upends decades and, in fact, centuries of this country's foundational principles. And it should be chilling not just to all the federal civil servants, and there are at least 2 million of them in this country, who have federal civil service protections. It should be chilling to all of us because we no longer have the rights that we thought we did.
And what happens to the case now? Does it go up to does it go to a higher court, or is that the judgment? Are those the rules under which we live as long as Donald Trump is president? Well,
this case, to be clear, is about whether or not he can fire an AUSA, a federal prosecutor. And right now on the books, what we have is an order from the judge that dispute, that fundamental question about our separation of powers, belongs in federal court and not in an administrative body, which is what the federal government tried to do. Mm-hmm. Just to back up for a second, normally when a federal employee is fired, they go to something called the MSPB, which people really hadn't heard about, but now has sort of come to light. It's the Merit Systems Protection Board, another acronym. And you're supposed to go and have like a fair and impartial hearing about whether or not the government.
And let me just interrupt and ask you, because we've covered with Glenn and with Michael a lot of the fired FBI agents. Is that the kind of body that would look at all those firings?
Yes.
So they've been busy.
They should have been busy, but the president fired the only Democratic member to eviscerate a quorum. He then appointed a new member that is, frankly, his henchman, it looks like, and he issued an executive order that said, you administrative body, you have to interpret the law the way that I tell you to. So now the judges, the administrative body who would normally oversee this type of case, is in his back pocket. And this federal judge said, enough. That's not how the statute works. If you, federal government, are going to fire somebody citing a constitutional power, not a statutory power, or your constitutional power under Article 2, then that fight does not belong before that body. That fight belongs before an Article 3 judge. So that's the decision we have on the books. Now we go into proving our case, right? The government has now admitted that she wasn't fired for cause. They have said, as of Tuesday, in their answer filed on the public docket, that she was not fired for cause, that she was not fired for her performance. So why was she fired? That's the question, and that's the question we're going to get answered through discovery. Hopefully we'll take depositions of the people who purportedly made the decision. They now claim it's Attorney General Bondi. At the same time, Attorney General Bondi, is no longer with the government, so they've recertified her decision with the current acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche, bringing up all sorts of thorny issues about how this works. But the reason this is important is because, just as a very quick reminder, a little civics lesson here in grade school, but, there's Article 1 of our Constitution, creates Congress. Article 2 of our Constitution creates the executive branch, puts the president in charge. And Article 3 creates the court system. And then you have the Bill of Rights. What this administration has said from day one is that Article 2 is more important than anything else.
Right.
You can take that power. You can ignore laws passed by Congress under Article 1. You may be able to ignore court orders issued under Article 3. And now, as of yesterday in open court, you can also ignore the Bill of Rights. You can fire somebody in violation of their First Amendment right to speech, their First Amendment right to association, equal protection, due process. All these things that we hold near and dear are no longer applicable to the President of the United States.